Today we will look at one of the most controversial issues in contemporary society and try and trace its historical origins and some of the work that has been done around this issue. And the issue is that of race and racism. What is race and what is racism? One of the most important intellectuals of the late 19th century and early 20th century was the so-called mixed race intellectual by the name of Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, who said that the problem of the 20th century would be the problem of race. And he should know better than other people because he himself was a victim of racism. For example, he graduated, in fact, he was the first so-called non-white to graduate from Harvard University, but could not hold any position in American society. And even earlier, he had very strong arguments with so-called black intellectual Booker T. Washington, one of the most famous names in American history. Booker T. Washington was the leader of the so-called blacks and ex-slaves in the United States. And he was so compromising that he accepted almost everything that the so-called whites wanted blacks to accept. But Du Bois opposed this because he said there is really no difference between so-called whites and so-called blacks. Only that whites are in a dominant position because they are in the majority. So the majority would always impose their will and authority on people. So Du Bois became extremely critical of this and tried to describe the feelings of black people towards certain issues. And he wrote a very widely read and circulated book entitled The Souls of Black Folk. This has become an American and almost a global text, that is widely read. Du Bois knew the history of some of these ideas, but he was quite consistent in opposing any views that try to oppress or undermine the dignity of so-called non-whites. And for this, he became quite famous, and he was prohibited from holding certain positions and decided to leave the United States. And he went and lived in Accra, Ghana. And in fact, that is where he died. And from there, he led what came to be known as the Pan-Africanist movement. This was an attempt to unite all black people from the Caribbean, from the African Americans, and Africans in order to oppose those policies that were detrimental to the advancement of black people. And even before Du Bois, there were other people who showed that race is really a myth that was created. It is not something that is genetic or biological. It is just a social construction. And that the idea of race, as we understand it today, or it has been articulated by philosophers of racism, are completely different from the classical understanding of race. And there's an interesting book here by Ivan Hannaford. It's called Race, the History of an Idea in the West. And it would be interesting to read this particular text, because it demonstrates in no uncertain, unambiguous terms that race or racism as we understand it today was never understood the same way in the classical world. And when you talk of the classical world, we're talking about, for example, the Greeks, the Romans, and other groups that came. The term race, as we understand it now, or as it is articulated now, derives from the first philosopher of racism, a proponent of the exclusionist white race. And this man was called Gobineau. Gobineau is the one who came up, with the idea of the so-called Aryan race. That the so-called whites came from a particular race, and they were descendant of the Aryans. And we know the term Aryans now. For example, there's an Indian sect called the Arya Samaj. So these were supposed to be the Aryans, or the pure white people. And their symbol was the swastika that was later adopted by the Nazis. And the swastika associated with the Aryans was turned upside down. But this is what came to be adopted by the Nazis. And of course, we know what the consequences of the Nazi dominant were. For example, they considered Jews as less than human beings. That gave them this strong anti-Semitic posture. And the anti-Semitic posture, of course, led to the Holocaust, the elimination of Jews, or the attempt by the Nazi regime under Hitler to eliminate the Jews. And as we know, about 6 million Jews perished because of this. And many of them also ran away to other parts of the world, mostly Britain, and then many of them went to the United States after that, because they were looking for a safe sanctuary. So, in essence, this is the basis of Gobineau's philosophy. And now we know that race is a social construction, just like any. It has really no biological basis, and it was understood differently in different periods. Some Enlightenment philosophers used it in specific ways to justify European so-called white dominance over the so-called inferior races. A leading woman intellectual by the name of Anna Arendt called this metaphysics of of the gutter. I think we know what the gutter is. So she called this metaphysics of the gutter. She herself was of Jewish background, but had no racist inclinations at all. And she interacted with some of the leading intellectuals of Europe. But many Germans fell victims to this ideology and assumed that it was something that was real rather than a social construction. Intellectuals like Anna Arendt and others tried to deconstruct this idea of race as a biological, as a genetic thing, that it is just a social construction. And it was constructed in order to give the illusion, as Bernard Crick called it, an optical illusion. That some people are superior to others, and they seem to look like distinctive, from other people. But there's absolutely no basis whatsoever in reality, and that race has been interpreted differently in different times. But some of these leading intellectuals of Europe used or assumed that somebody like Immanuel Kant, who was considered as a very rational person and a very influential European intellectual, who was, in Königsberg, what is today part of Russia. He subscribed, to a certain extent, to the idea that darker people, less intelligence than those that are white, and there are also notorious personalities like Albert Schweitzer, who was supposed to be a philanthropist, who said that the non-whites are my brothers, but they are my younger brothers. So no matter how, so that's how terms like boy was used, in the United States, because these ideas traveled across the Atlantic, and they formed the basis of the new American Republic. So we have to be aware of the ramifications of some of these ideas, although they have no basis in reality. They are just social constructions. And as we saw, we trace this back to the main philosopher of racism, Gobineau. He tried to articulate, the so-called white position on this issue, and sold it to significant population in the societies in which they found themselves. But as we said, one of the consistent opponents of racism was W.E.B. Du Bois. So he because he could not amount to anything in the United States, he went and studied also in Germany. And of course, he was also quite outstanding there. He was always the best student. And that, of course, gave the lie to the idea that whites have more intellectual power than non-whites.